I didn't plan to make this video. So there's iOS and there's Android. Two very different mobile operating systems, and they both have their merits. Obviously on the internet, anything can be argued, and there's quite a heated debate whether iOS is better than Android or Android's better than iOS. And I wanted to make this video talking about the merits of both iOS and Android, what's wrong with each platform, and why maybe buying an iPhone 8 Plus was a mistake, at least for me. So I wanted to break both iOS and Android down and just try to think out loud for myself, as well as help anyone who's interested in one platform or the other kind of know what they're getting into when they buy an iPhone or an Android phone. So first, there's iOS, which is the majority of phones out there. Most of them are actually up to date, unlike Android, and most of them work quite well after a few years. They have super fast software updates. As soon as a major vulnerability is discovered out in the wild, Apple will quickly patch it and push that update out to millions of devices. iPhones have super long support windows. They have up to like 4 years of software updates, which is pretty insane compared to Android. Android, you're lucky if you got 2 years. Apple really focuses on good user interfaces, good design. They consider design to be one of the biggest parts of building an app. Like, if you have great code, but your app looks terrible, people are just gonna think the app's terrible, even though it could be the most beautiful code ever written. Apple really focuses on good user interfaces, good design, and every year they tweak that a little bit to make it more consistent across all their apps. The app ecosystem in iOS is quite amazing. Social media apps such as Instagram or Snapchat work much better on iOS. For example, say you're uploading an Instagram story. Well, you basically can't on Android. If you try to upload pretty much any video, the upload will fail. And it won't give you any reason. It'll give you an option to retry, but that always just fails. So iOS is better in that front. Camera quality in Instagram and Snapchat is miles better in iOS. On Android, it's literally taking a screenshot of your screen and then uploading that as your picture, instead of actually taking the raw data from the camera, which iOS does. So camera quality is insane, both in the native camera app as well as in third-party camera apps. For example, Filmic Pro, which is a manual video camera app on iOS, lets you tweak so much of the camera. You can set the frames per second, the resolution, megabits per second, the focus, the shutter speed, everything can be adjusted, and it is an amazing app. I love it. So that's camera quality. However, there are negatives to iOS. It's still pretty buggy. Many people think, and I also thought this when I first bought my iPhone 8 Plus, was that iOS is this super stable and never crashes, there's no bugs, blah 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 blah. No, it still has its bugs. The other negative with iOS is that it's pretty expensive. This was an $870 phone, and that's a lot. That's a lot of money to drop on a phone, which might now be the new norm, but still, it's almost $1,000. Another negative with iOS is that apps are extremely locked down. They're sandbox. They can't really do anything outside of their own little app. Whereas on Android, apps have much more capability. And lastly, it's not customizable almost at all. Yeah, you can reorganize your home screen, but you're locked to this very boring grid of apps. You can change out the keyboard, but it doesn't always use your third-party keyboard. It will often swap that out for the default iOS keyboard when, say, you're on the lock screen, which is super annoying. You can't replace the default web browser, which Chrome is a million times better than Safari in that you have way more features. So those are some positives and negatives regarding iOS. Side note, I have been recording this back to back. However, I'm using the sun's light's reflection, so it suddenly got dark. Alright, so Android, an operating system that I've been using for a very long time, but I just left it, like a poor couch that I don't use anymore. Threw it off to the side of the road. So let's first talk about the benefits of Android. Man, my lighting literally just disappeared. I probably shouldn't use the sun as my general light. I had to switch up my lighting situation. I have to probably set up a lighting situation that isn't dependent on the sun. first, the benefits of Android. Android is super customizable. You can replace the home screen, the camera, the web browser, the texting app, literally anything can be replaced, and it is amazing. One of my favorite things to replace is the home screen, where you can customize it, set how big the icons are, what the icons even look like. There's something called icon packs where you can replace icons. It's amazing. If you're an Android user and you're looking for a home screen app, try Lawn Chair. It's a really good app. Second, it's a heck of a lot cheaper. Most Android phones run at around $500. Most iPhones run at around $700. Now, obviously this depends on what Android phone you get. The Samsung Note 8 costs around $1,000, whereas the Alcatel A30 costs $50. Obviously, you can tell which one's gonna be a better phone. $50 phone can't even handle basic tasks. What I'm saying is you can decide how much you want to spend on your Android phone. Now you can do this to an extent with iOS. However, most of the time the older iPhones run way slower, whereas most modern Android phones, even if they're cheaper, they'll still run very well. Third, apps are way more versatile. Obviously, we talked about being able to replace the home screen. That's a very big thing that any iOS app can't do. One very versatile app is Naptime by Francisco Franco. You can check out the link down in the description. What Francisco's app does is battery optimization using a system feature called Doze. Normally, Doze, which is a battery saving system in Android, normally what Doze does is only turn on after a certain amount of time your phone screen has been turned off. But if you bump the phone, let the phone move at all, it will instantly turn off Doze. So most of the time, Doze isn't even on your phone. But it's a great feature, and Francisco Franco decided to just turn it on by default. And Francisco's app makes for incredible battery life. All right, now for the negatives of Android. Social media apps are pretty terrible on Android. So basically, camera quality in Snapchat and Instagram from the apps themselves, it's terrible. However, it looks lovely on iOS. Another negative of Android is that they have half or even less the support windows of iOS. What I mean is this. When you buy an Android phone, most people expect that you'll get software updates. Some people hate software updates, but they're important for security, for features, for bug fixes, things like that. On Android, you might get a year or 2 years if you're lucky. On iOS, you buy an iPhone, and it can literally last you 4 years. You'll get updates for literally that long. The iPhone 5S has just been updated to iOS 11, and that phone was released in 2013. That's pretty crazy compared to Android. On Android, if you buy a phone, you're lucky if you get updated to the next version of Android. And that's very sad. Now, you're guaranteed updates if you buy a Google phone like a Nexus or a Pixel, but still, those phones only get 2 years of software updates and 3 or 4 years of security updates. So that's not that great in comparison to iOS. So those are the benefits and negatives of both iOS and Android. I kind of want to talk about why I bought the iPhone 8 Plus and why I'm wondering if that might not have been the best idea. So the iPhone 8 Plus was just announced on September the 11th, I think. September 12th. And honestly, it's quite the boring phone because if you look at it, it literally looks like an iPhone from 2014. The design hasn't changed that much. It still has the very familiar home button. It still has a 1080p display, which in comparison to the Samsung Galaxy S8 or the Google Pixel XL, those phones have 1440p displays. So there's that. The design is pretty old, but their camera quality is quite amazing. They have 1080p video at 240 frames per second. They have 4K video at 60 frames per second. And that's just unheard of in smartphones, and even most DSLRs can't even shoot that high resolution and high frame rate video. There were 3 reasons why I got the iPhone. First was stability. From my experience with iOS 10 back early this year, I came to the belief that iOS 11, or iOS in general, was super stable. However, that's not the case. iOS has had multiple issues. Frames drop when you're just swiping on your home screen. There's some weird hotspot bugs, and sometimes apps will disappear off your home screen for like no apparent reason. So yeah, there are definitely bugs in iOS. So that was a bit of a disappointment. And obviously, there's no such thing as a perfect piece of software. There's always going to be bugs. There's always going to be some vulnerability. But from what I had seen and what I had read and what I thought was that iOS was better in that regard than Android. The second reason was that I thought iOS was much more secure. And it is in some ways, but not in others. It does get updated very quickly when a new vulnerability is discovered. However, Android does that too. They do monthly security updates, patching numerous holes and bugs, vulnerabilities every single month. So the fact that iOS is more secure than Android isn't necessarily true. If you have a super old Android phone that's not getting updates anymore, then yes, that's true. But that's same with an iOS phone that's say you have an iPhone 5 or 4, your phone's pretty insecure. So that knocks out both stability and security off of my reasons why I bought the iPhone. Third was design. Apple really cares about design. They constantly update their design language and the interface of iOS to make it more usable, kind of freshen it up, and just to make it look nice. Android, on the other hand, doesn't. Google announced something with Android 8.0 called adaptive icons. Basically what you do is you supply a background and a foreground of your app icon, and the system will crop out a shape. So a circle, square, a squircle. This allows the icons to look uniform. However, Google's been doing is taking their existing icon, shrinking it down, and putting a white background, which basically is pointless because then your app icons are just these ugly white plates. So that's a bit annoying. Google doesn't really seem to follow their own design language anymore. They outlined something called material design, and they've been updating it, but they haven't been updating their apps to follow it. So that's pretty annoying. So that's stability, security, and design. The 3 reasons why I switched to iOS, but now I'm wondering, maybe I shouldn't have. It's a $900 phone. Now one thing that iOS can do that Android definitely can't is the Instagram stories thing. I really enjoy them, and I really thought they were cool, but maybe I should just stick to YouTube. I can still upload daily 15-second videos if I want. I mean, that's what Instagram stories are. And obviously that would be kind of weird to have super short videos, but still it would be something to motivate myself to make more content and to make it regularly. I don't know. I'm tired of switching phones. I've switched through too many phones in the past year. To be honest, it's a bit of a hobby. There are other things I need to do with my money, more important things such as a car, an actual laptop, such as some camera lenses, things like that. I shouldn't just keep on buying phones. And now I don't want to make the same mistake I did a couple months ago when I switched from an iPhone 7 Plus to a OnePlus 5. I thought that iOS wasn't as good as Android, and then just now I thought Android wasn't as good as iOS. They both have their negatives, they both have their positives, but I don't know which one I should decide. And $900 is a lot of money. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch the Google Pixel keynote tomorrow. And I'm going to continue to think about these positives and negatives of both platforms. And if the Google Pixel is $100, $150, $200 cheaper than the iPhone, it might be worth switching. And honestly, I shouldn't be taking pictures or shooting video on a phone. I should be using my DSLR. I should be getting a little bit more serious about this whole cinematography and photography thing that I want to pursue. So those are my thoughts. I wanted to make a YouTube video about it. Hopefully it made sense. So that's the end of the video. I hope you liked it. Hit that thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't, there's that button, but it doesn't have to be there. And then there's also the subscribe button if you like me. And you can hit that bell button if you're already subscribed so that you can get notified when I upload a new video. So that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.